You know, when I was dating Amy, who was eventually going to become my wife, thanks, Brett, we would go down to Shreveport to hang out with her mom. In fact, when we were first dating, basically our dates consisted of going to rent a video and then watching it with her mom. And that was great. Her mom would fall asleep a lot of the time, so we would kiss during that portion. But anyway, we were down there. I was studying to be a pastor, and there was this church that was going to be feeding the poor. And so her mom suggested that we go, and we helped serve. And so I said, let's go. And we got there to the church, and the news was there. And for some reason, they said, let's interview that guy. So they came over to me, and they interviewed me. And I was on the news that night. But she interviewed me, and I thought, you know what, I'm in theology. I'm a Bible student right now. I'm going to put the gospel into this interview. So she says, why are you out here and why are you serving these meals? I said, you know what? The reason I'm here, and I really meant this, the reason I'm here is because the greatest gift of all time was given through Jesus Christ. And I'm just kind of responding to that generosity and giving to other people. And I thought, that'd be great. That'll get on the news. And she says, And also, what if this ever happened to you and you became poor? And she puts the microphone in front of my face. And so I say, my next sentence was, if I ever found myself in this situation, I would want someone to do the same for me. Which we hear all the time on every news broadcast. Everyone always says that. And which sentence do you think they put on the news? The second sentence. Now, I'm not mad about it, but if you think about that sentence, it makes it all about me, right? I'm actually doing this for a future poor version of myself. That's why I'm doing this. I think I might be poor, and I'm hoping that I'll get some sort of karma from this thing. Listen, that's not the gospel. Karma is not the gospel. Making it all about me is not what I wanted to do, but that's what ended up happening. Right? There I am on the news, a Bible student, making it all about me. Welcome to Reality Church. We are starting a new series called Crowding Out Christmas. We have a tendency, I think, this month to have all sorts of ideas of what we want Christmas to be like. And if we're really not careful, we're going to get to the end of the month and we will have done a ton of stuff and we've ended up crowding out Christmas. If you are new here, welcome. So glad that you made your way out on a very cold morning. It's a little too early to be this cold, but you're out here, so you win. And I want you to know, if you're new, that we do something at the end called Q&R. You can ask questions. If you're cynical or you're skeptical about Jesus, welcome. This is a great place for you to be. We want you to ask questions. We want you to continue to ask questions about who God is and what this whole thing is about. So, all right. So right when Jesus, during that interview, was making his way onto the scene, the whole thing was made about me. And that reasoning is so selfish. It really says, it's all about me. We can do that at Christmas. We face that same decision, you and I, like right now, right where we sit. This whole thing, the whole season, can end up being about us. I mean, where we go, how much we spent, how much we should have said no to the party invites. The whole month could go by, and you have been in the spotlight, the main character, the entire month. Let's fast forward, you and me. Let's fast forward to the afternoon of December 25th. All the presents have been opened, all the papers everywhere. And you've got that same nagging feeling. You're there on the couch, everything has happened. And you think, I've managed a whole month of activity and food and gifts and going from party to store to church to your parents to your grandparents, decorating, buying, watching cringe Christmas flicks. I would recommend Hot Frosty if you haven't seen that. Or Frosty Hot, I don't know. It was either breakfast or a movie. I haven't seen it actually, but I did see the ads for it. With all of that going on, with all of the hustle and bustle, and by the way, you can only legally say hustle and bustle in the state of Nebraska from Black Friday till December 24th. It's the law. So don't say hustle and bustle. There's really no other time to really say hustle. Do you ever say that during the summer? Like hustle and bustle. By the way, I saw a sign on my way to church that said season's greetings. Seasons. Doesn't that work every season? Like, can't you say that in summer? You should be able to say that in summer. I think we should confuse somebody at the park on summer and say season's greetings, because it always works. Let's move on. What if there is something you can do, like right now, that afternoon on December 25th, you don't have that nagging feeling. In other words, you can get to Christmas Day and go, you know what? I think we did this right. I think we did this the right way. A decision that we can make together that can prevent us from crowding out Christmas. And you might be saying, you're not the boss of me. I'll do Christmas the same way I always do Christmas, all right? Preachers, all the same, right? Trying to steal the joy out from Christmas like some pulpit-standing Grinch. Well, you know what? As Bobby Brown says, that's your prerogative. I'm not gonna. You don't need my permission to make your own decisions. That's for my crowd, okay? That's for my people. You guys get that? Here's the thing about life, not just Christmas. It's very easy to say it's all about me. In fact, we don't ever say that out loud. We would never say that. But we would live that way. And we tend to think, well, maybe I'm the main character, or maybe. And we even have a slang and a culture built around calling people king and queen. I'll try it, okay? I know I'm a little nervous about this, okay? Do they say slay king? Is that what they say? Is that what the kids these days are saying? I have a blazer on. Does that look cool? Anyway, let's move on. Calling people king. We prop each other up and we say, it's all about you. Let's put the spotlight on you. Let's learn who you are all about. And we even build a culture around influencers. People who have zero talent, but they have a camera and a microphone, and they just get on and tell us their opinions. We build our entire world around, it's all about me. But about 2,000 years ago, somebody comes on the scene. And we changed our calendars because of who came on the scene. And that's why we're dedicating this series, because there's somebody else that maybe has a right to say, maybe it's not all about you. Maybe there's something bigger going on here. So if you have your Bibles, turn to Matthew 2. We're going to be looking at verses 1 through 12. Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea during the reign of, this is going to be important in this story, during the reign of King Herod. Let me tell you a little bit about King Herod. King Herod was not Jewish by birth. He was he was Idumean. He was born in a region south of Judea, and his father, Antipater, was a king. He was the king of that region. And through a lot of connections and backroom dealings, Herod became the governor of Judea after his father Antipater died. And he became a pretty good king, at least as far as the Romans were concerned. Actually, he wasn't installed by the Romans, but he kept that role after the Romans took over. He defeated the Hasmoneans. That's a fun name. Say Hasmonean with me. Hasmonean. You guys did it. I can't believe that. All right. So the Hasmoneans, I don't know if you guys know this, but between the Old Testament and the New Testament, there was 400 years of basic silence. There was no Bible being written about that time. But we do have books, and it's about the Maccabean rebellion. They rebelled against Rome. And when Herod came into power, he kind of defeated them. And then in order to kind of secure his power, he married a Hasmonean named Mariamne. She was beautiful. He loved her. And he made friends with Mark Antony. Ever heard of Mark Antony? Herod made friends with Mark Antony. He made friends with Octavius Caesar. That was when Mark Antony and Octavius were co-ruling Rome. And he became friends with both of them, but mainly friends with Mark. If you've ever been in a three-person friendship, you're normally, better friends with one of them. And then when one of them leaves the room, you talk about them. That's the rules of a three-person friendship. And so, don't you hate it when she does that? That kind of stuff. So he was really good friends with Mark Antony. And guess what? Mark Antony and Octavius got in a big fight. And who won? Octavius.
So Herod's kind of in a bad situation. He picked the wrong friend. So he travels to Rome. He goes to Octavius Caesar, who's going to be called Augustus Caesar, and he says, you know what? I was super loyal to Mark Antony, but you'll get that same loyalty from me now that he's out of the picture. And Augustus bought it. He made him king of Judea. He made him king of all Judea. King of the Jews, basically. So Jesus is being born in Bethlehem, and there's this guy named King Herod, and his title is literally King of the Jews. And that's going to be important, because you, sitting right where you at, which is what also the kids are saying, Slay King, right where you're at. If I was going to ask you, who's the king of your life? Who rules in your life? Who's got the crown? What would your answer to that be? Because King Herod knew what his title was. I am the king of the Jews. And about that time, some wise men from the eastern lands arrived in Jerusalem asking people, where is the newborn King of the Jews? They were asking where the King of the Jews was that had just been born, and who does Herod think he is? Now, what God is saying, even though Herod might not have known it, is you might have the title, but you don't own the throne. Herod had gotten to be a king by, in a way that would have made the cast of King of Thrones very proud. I've never seen that show, but I'm told that it's, there's a lot of murder. Am I right? Okay. Basically, he was cunning. He was sly. He would do whatever it took to get power and to keep power. And the wise men say, where's this newborn King of the Jews? We saw his star as it rose, and we've come to worship him. King Herod was deeply disturbed when he heard this, as was everyone in Jerusalem. Why was everyone in Jerusalem disturbed when Herod was disturbed? Because it wasn't safe when Herod was disturbed. Herod died in 4 BC. You might ask some questions about that a little bit later on. He died in 4 BC, and right before he died, he was sick with almost everything you could get, basically. And some people think that he was losing his mind. And so in those last few years, he became really jealous and really insecure. And the reason all of Jerusalem gets upset when he gets upset is the same reason why the whole family gets upset when that one person gets upset, right? They're trouble. And Herod was definitely trouble. Herod was great at eliminating threats. Remember that wife that I told you, Marion May, who was Hasmonean? He got a little bit insecure about her. And even though he married her and loved her, he also executed her. And from then on, by the way, he said, I have conversations with her. He was losing it, the way he had built his life. And then he thought, what about her sons? I got three sons from Marion May, and they're going to assume the crown. He killed all 3 of his sons. All 3 of them. He killed his mother-in-law. I said that in last service, and my mother-in-law was in the service, and it got a little tense. No, it didn't get tense at all. He killed his wife's grandfather. Caesar Augustus, the guy that he had pledged his loyalty to, Octavius Caesar, Caesar Augustus, said this about him: I'd rather be Herod's pig than his son. Think about that. I'd rather be his pig. At least he didn't kill his pigs. He called a meeting, Herod, after he heard this. He called a meeting of the leading priests and the teachers of religious law and asked. Now, Herod was Jewish, but he was kind of Jewish by culture. So he wasn't really up on all the stuff that was going on and all the prophecies. He says, hey, where is the Messiah supposed to be born? Interesting that King Herod is not just asking about a king. He's actually asking about a true king. He's saying there's a prophecy that there's going to be a true king, a Messiah, the anointed one, the Christ, okay? Where is that one supposed to be born? And they said, well, in Bethlehem in Judea. They said in Bethlehem in Judea because there were 2 Bethlehems. And so they wanted to point out the one. And for this is what the prophet wrote. This is, I think, from Micah 5:2. And you, O Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are not least among the ruling cities of Judah, even though that village was probably only around 300 to 500 people. You're not least, and here's why. Because a ruler will come from you who will be the shepherd for my people Israel. This is the same city where King David was born. And this prophecy was around 400 years before Jesus was born. Now, let me tell you another interesting thing about this. Herod was an architectural genius. He built a port city called Caesarea Maritime, where he actually built, there was no breakwater there. He actually built, you can actually look this up if you are a documentarian or a documentary fan. I love this stuff. He built this breakwater so he could build a port, and he named it after Augustus Caesar because he was that kind of guy. But it was a beautiful city. Caesarea Maritime had an amphitheater, had a temple there to Caesar. It was just a big deal. He also built the temple in Jerusalem and a palace for himself. But his favorite place was a place called Herodium. Herodium started out as a kind of a dirt pile, and he moved tons and tons and tons of more dirt and built sort of a mountain. And on top of that mountain, he built a palace. And at the base of it, there were gardens and a pool and all sorts of stuff. He would hang out in Herodium a lot. It was about 8 miles south of Jerusalem, and he would go there. And the reason he built it, by the way, was he said, maybe someday some army's going to come, and they're going to attack us, and I need a place where I can go up and be safe. And so he would hang out there because he was pretty insecure. Well, Herodium is about 2.5 miles from Bethlehem. So his palace was built in a place where he could actually see that little village that they were talking about. So when they told him, the Bethlehem in Judah. And he said, yeah, I think I know that place. So that's where the shepherd for my people will be born. Then Herod called for a private meeting with the wise men. He calls them in. And chances are, I don't know whether this is true or not. We don't know where he met. But I think the chances are pretty high that they met in his palace in Herodium. He calls for this private meeting with the wise men, and he learned from them the time when the star first appeared. So he's doing some math in his head. When was this baby born? This is kind of important too, by the way. The wise men did not show up at the stable on the evening of Jesus' birth. I don't know if you guys know that, and I don't want to mess up your creche or your nativity scene. I don't want to mess that up, but you should have a dragon and not have the wise men. That goes back to an old series. You can look that one up. So the wise men showed up probably definitely when Jesus was a toddler, okay? Because they said they saw the child, and the Greek word there is toddler. Another reason that we know that they didn't show up on the night, or that I believe that they didn't show up on the night of his birth, is because 8 days later, Mary and Joseph go into Jerusalem, and they do the naming ceremony where they circumcise Jesus, and they tell the name of the baby. And they have to give a sacrifice, and they gave the poor man sacrifice, like 2 turtle doves. It means they're poor. They don't have any money. But what did the wise men give when they came to see the child? They gave gold, and a lot of it. So unless you think Mary is kind of a tax cheat, then you have to have the wise men come after they actually did the naming ceremony. So there we go. He asked them the time when the star first appeared. Then he told them, go to Bethlehem, search carefully for the child, and when you find him, come back and tell me so that I can go and worship him too. I want to worship him. You guys go find him, tell me where the house is, and me and some of my friends will come and we will worship him. And they were, they said, they left. And they after that interview, the wise men took off. They went their way. And the star they had seen in the east guided them toward Bethlehem. Now, who are these wise men? Well, they're like magi. They're probably stargazers. Daniel, by the way, in the Old Testament was probably named among this kind of crew. Daniel, who has a book in the Old Testament. So it's interesting. We don't know whether they were Jewish. Probably not. Some people actually say they might have been. So because of the influence of Daniel, they're from modern-day Persia or Iran, and they're traveling to see this new king. And the star, it went ahead of them and stopped over the place where the child was. And when they saw the star, they were filled with joy. They entered the house and saw the child with his mother Mary, and they bowed down and they worshiped him. These were powerful men. One more thing that might ruin your nativity scene. There were probably way more than 3 of them. There weren't just 3 dudes on camels. They probably had a ton of these wise men, a whole club of them, and they're supporting people, pack animals and their servants and all of that. And the reason we think 3 sometimes is because they brought 3 gifts. And they gave him those 3 gifts. They bowed down and they worshiped him. And they opened their treasure chest and they gave him gifts of gold and frankincense and myrrh. Super expensive stuff, which is going to come in handy. They returned to their own country by another route, for God had warned them in a dream not to return to Herod. So, Herod had reached his role as king by backroom dealings. He was smart, he was connected, and worked really hard to get there, but he was no match for God. He had a plan to get rid of this king, execute a child. It was his kingdom after all. I mean, there's only room for one king. But he was up against something he had no clue about. See, he wasn't a theist, really, I don't think. He was more of a meist. He bought into meism. That's when a person decides that they're the MVP, that they're the main character, that they're the star, they're the king. Because they want to be. I'm the king because I want to be. I rule everything because that's what I want to do. And the only threat to a wannabe king is the real one. And when the real one comes on the scene, it really disturbs Herod. This is an ancient problem, but it's also a current problem. It's an ancient problem. Herod had it. We got it too. And you know where it stems from? It stems from the original wannabe king, Lucifer himself. When we set ourselves up as the boss of our kingdom, when we refuse to yield before God, we reveal that we're very religious, we're very committed to our God, ourself, running our lives according to a deep belief that we are the center of existence. We would never say that. We would never say, it's all about me. We never say that. We just live it. We say, God may be king of the universe, but I'm king of my life. I'll do what I want to do. The problem for Herod and the problem for you and me is there's only room for one king. Jesus is not looking for a co-ruler. He's not looking for someone to share the crown. Joseph and Mary were also warned in a dream to take their child and their little family to Egypt. And that was going to cost money, by the way. And God provided in advance, through these wise men, the price to get them to Egypt. And they stayed there for a long time until the Herod that we're talking about died. Herod found out that they had gone another way. They weren't going to come and point out the child. He wasn't going to know the exact house, the exact child. Herod was furious when he realized that the wise men had outwitted him. He sent soldiers to kill all the boys in and around Bethlehem who were 2 years old and under, based on the wise men's report of the star's first appearance. We don't have the answer for when the wise men said, here's when the star appeared. They might have said 2 years. Herod might have just been trying to hedge his bets. They might have said it was about a year ago or a year and a half ago, and he was just trying to widen the scope. He killed these little baby boys and devastated their families. Now, why didn't that make the history books, by the way? We only find this recorded in Matthew. Josephus doesn't talk about it, and I think here's the reason. Josephus is a historian of that time period. I think here's the reason. Remember I told you Bethlehem was a village probably of around 300 to 500 people? Think about how many of those people are women of childbearing years, and how many of them are actually having children within that 2-year frame, and then how many of those are boys. You probably have, even though it's tragic and it's horrible, you probably have about 5 to 10 boys and families getting, the boys being executed and the families being devastated. It's horrific. There's no other word for it, but it doesn't make the history books. But Matthew is highlighting it because he's also wanting to highlight the fact that Jesus is the new Moses. And remember, Pharaoh killed all of the firstborn sons in Egypt because he was worried that they were going to become too powerful. So that's why it's in here and maybe not in other places. The slaughter of the innocents is what it's called. And I think we need to highlight something. Meism, putting me at the center of my life, always comes with a price. But here's the thing. In meism, the price is paid by other people. The people who know me. The people who have to hang out with me. The people who are in my sphere of influence, but I'm making life all about me. Meism comes at a price, but other people pay it. That's the beautiful part about it for people like Herod. He can just do what he wants. And yes, there's a price that comes, but he's forcing other people to pay the price the whole time. You know people like this. You don't want to be somebody like that. Herod's brutal action was actually a prophecy. It fulfilled what God had spoken through the prophet Jeremiah. A cry was heard in Ramah, weeping and great mourning. Rachel weeps for her children, refusing to be comforted, for they are dead. And here is the horrible part of it for me. Probably from a hill not far from Bethlehem, Herod was maybe in a pool. And the way that sound works over that valley up to the hill, there's a very good chance that that evening he heard the cries of these moms and these families. And all that it meant to him was good. Good. All the potential threats were gone. From Herodium, that extravagant display of power, architectural genius, his obsessive need to secure his own legacy, his show of wealth, his show of ego to remind people of his dominance. He rose to and maintained the title of king through death. That's what kings do. That's what kings do. They send other people to die for them. They eliminate anyone who threatens their rule. It's brutal and it's ruthless, and that's the way we build our kingdoms. Herod built all over Judea to secure his legacy. He required people around him to die instead of himself. Why? Because in Herod's mind, there is only room for one king, and it's going to be him. You know what I mean? I think you do. I think you do know. Because we, like it or not, we do the same thing. We crowd out Christmas for the same reason Herod tried to crowd it out himself. We've built our own kingdom. We have a life, or we have areas of our life that we're just not going to cede over to any other king. They're off limits to the king. Herod didn't know it, but the king of the Jews, the king of kings, who had come to save the world, would have saved him too. Jesus being born wasn't bad news for Herod. It could have been the best thing he ever heard if he decided not to play king of his own life. Guys, Jesus coming to our planet is not bad news for you. It doesn't mean that you don't get to make your own choices. It doesn't mean that he's going to eliminate fun for you. It's good news for you. If you realize that he's king and you're not. But the control and power is worth it, you know? Herod didn't know it, but Jesus had come for him as well. He died for the world, and that world included Herod, and it includes you right where you sit. Not some improved version of you, not some remade or reformed version of you, but the one who sits in your chair right now, the one who wants to be king, the one who's cynical, or maybe skeptical about God even existing, the one who wants to make your own plans, and maybe you've already got in your mind some stuff that you're going to do that you know that God wouldn't approve of, but you're going to do it anyway, God still came for you. He still loves you. Herodium was a hill, an ego-driven hill, show of wealth, and a display of the fear of losing everything. But there was another hill about 8 miles north outside of Jerusalem. And another sort of king put on display another kind of power there. And that hill was called Golgotha. It looked like a skull, so they called it Golgotha, the place of the skull. And the king who would set up his kingdom there didn't do it out of fear of losing power or fear of death. Kings send other people out to die for them, but this king went out for himself to die for us. There were no protective walls. There were no refreshing pools, just jeers of the crowd, just curses of those who couldn't see who Jesus was. A total different kind of hill, a completely different kind of kingdom. Which kingdom are you building? Which kingdom do you want to be a part of? Herodium or Golgotha? I believe, starting out this month, the cross is the only way to make room for Christmas, because the cross is what made room for us. The cross is what makes room for you. I don't know you. I don't know what you've done or what you're thinking about doing. I do know that right where you sit, that Christmas is good news for you because of what the cross did for you. Jesus defeated sin and death for you. And here's the reason. Jesus would never, you remember that interview that I did for KSLA? Jesus would never say, well, the reason I'm saving people is because if I ever found myself lost and in need of a Savior, I would hope that they would do the same for me. He wouldn't say that. That's ridiculous. He knows that we could not and would not do it for him. That's what love looks like. That's what sacrifice looks like. Christmas leaves room for only one king. So, take off your crown. Take off the crown. It doesn't fit anyway. You're not going to share the throne with the King of Kings. You aren't that great at running your life. Wouldn't that be great? Isn't that refreshing for you to just know, I'm not that great at running my life? Fear and out-of-control desires are no way to be free. Take off the crown. Stop doing whatever you want to do. Submit. Bow down. It'll be hard to do until you realize that you were in a prison, not a palace. That all of your decisions and all your things to be free were actually shackling you to a life that's actually pretty miserable if you stretch it out. Yeah, you can do whatever you want to do. You can go down that road. It's not going to end well. Take off the crown. Stop trying to be king. Herod, at the end of his life, was stricken with all sorts of diseases. And he was so insecure that he was upset that when he died, people wouldn't mourn him. So he gathered 400 influential leaders into an amphitheater. And he said, now when you hear that I die, kill all of them so that at least Israel will mourn. Now, we don't think they carried out that order, but that's the kind of guy we're dealing with. Take off the crown. It ends ugly. Recognize the true king. Notice I said recognize. We're not making Jesus king. He already is. He was already king of Herod's life as a baby in the manger. This is not up for debate. Jesus isn't conniving. He's not doing backroom deals. All authority is his. And any power, any authority that's yours, you got from him. Any influence, any gifts, any wealth, you got from him. He is king. We don't make him king. We recognize that he's king. We bow to him. We submit. And then if that's true, now I'm a part of his kingdom. So what should I do? I should build his kingdom. We can set other people free from their wannabe kingdoms. We can tell them, hey, look, I know it feels good for a little bit to be in charge of your life and to make decisions about what goodness is and for you to be the king of your universe, but it's not going to end well. Build his kingdom. We got a ton of ways to do that. I'm going to name a few. You could serve on Christmas Eve. We have 130 plus spots for volunteers on Christmas Eve. It's one of those moments when people come to church that don't go to church normally. And I've had so many conversations out in the lobby about our Christmas Eve service. I've had many people come to me and say, my first experience with church was at Christmas Eve. And you guys did a song set to Queen's Bohemian Rhapsody. And I thought, I think I can come to this church. And then I've never gone anywhere else. We just decided to come here. And so I think it's really important for you to invite your one mores, but also to serve. 130 plus spots. On December 22nd, we're going to be meeting Church in the Round. I love that. We do that sometimes around here. We're going to be telling stories. And if you want to be one of those who, Jesus has done something significant in your life to put him in the spotlight, then if you have our app, you can, click on Share Stories, and you can do that. Very practical way for you to build his kingdom, for you to put the spotlight on somebody, not you. Invite people to the Christmas Eve service. We're going to talk about that a little bit later. So I'm going to highlight the Belize mission trip. Today is the last day to sign up. Scan that QR code. There are people in Belize, a church there, Kings Park Church, that we partner with. We learn from them. They learn from us. We get to see that God is not just working here in Papillion, La Vista, Millard. He's working in Bellevue. He's working everywhere. And he's raising up people everywhere. And it changes us when we go on mission trips. We're going to be, I don't have the slide, but we're going to be uniting with the global church February 28th through March 1st for Gather 25. It's a way to build the kingdom. Get involved in that. So, and remember, out of all this, there's only room for one king of your life. Take off the crown, recognize the king, build his kingdom. I wonder if you guys have any questions. I want to grow closer to God and my faith, but I always feel like I'm fighting my skepticism for the word in the Bible. Can you help me find a different perspective? I'm assuming we don't have very many questions, so please send them in because this one was asked last service, and I'm going to hopefully do a better job of answering it. If you have skepticism about the Bible, I would really encourage you to look into that. Look into ancient documents and how many ancient text we have of the Bible. A lot of people will tell you when it comes to the Bible, like all you have right now is a translation of a translation of a translation. And it's like, how can you even know that any of those words are what was originally written? It's like, no, we can actually know. There's a science behind this called textual criticism. And we don't actually have a translation of a translation of a translation. Have you ever played the game Telephone where you whisper somebody's ears? And then it comes at the end, it's like nothing like the original. That's not the way we get our Bibles. We have ancient manuscripts, and everybody that does a translation, they don't go to the last translation, they go to the ancient manuscripts. Everybody's looking at the same documents. It's like in the game of Telephone, where instead of whispering, everybody comes down to the end and says, "What did you say?" And they say it to them. And it's like, okay, I get it. That's what we have. It's very important for you to know that. We also have more copies of the Bible than we have of any ancient literature, and it's not even close. Please look into it. We're not afraid of questions and skepticism. Please look into it. And if you want to go grab lunch, I could tell you a whole lot more about that. Trust the word in the Bible. It is the authority. It's been attacked and attacked and attacked, and it's still standing. And I think that there's reason for that. So I hope that helps. Who's in charge of the coffee shop drinks and recipes? Well, not me. I'm not good at that. Who's in charge? Is it okay to say you and Lydia? Jared, right over here. Raise your hand, Jared. He's a coffee lover. I am not a coffee lover, but he made me a cup of mocha. Is that what it's called? Mocha. They call it mocha. You guys... And it tastes like hot chocolate to me. Anyway, it was incredible. Lydia made me one as well. So go there and grab that. I think we still have some left, right, after the service. So go get some. Was it the shepherds that showed up at his birth? They saw the star as well. The shepherds did show up at the birth. They not only saw a star, because it was in the sky, and it appeared on probably the night of his birth. They not only saw the star, they may not have even really seen it because the sky was filled with the angel armies. The sky was filled with the angels proclaiming and saying, "Unto you is born this day in the city of David, Bethlehem, a Savior, which is Christ the Lord, and you will find the baby wrapped in swaddling clothes and lying in a manger." And they went and they found the baby just as the angels. Oh, thank you. Remember when I quoted Luke just then? That was pretty cool. That's what they were there. And I think it's interesting. Jared's going to preach on this in a couple of weeks about how we look for wow, and wow might be in a different place than we thought it was. And part of it has to do with that story. So, yeah, they were there on the night of the birth. How does the birth of Jesus as a virgin birth from a human woman correlate with the sons of God in Genesis 6, taking wives for themselves and having giants as offspring? Okay, wow. I've never been asked this question in my life. And if you don't know what this question is referring to, it's referring to the Nephilim. I would really highly recommend you look at the works of Michael Heiser. When it comes to this, a very conservative biblical scholar. He talks about how these sons of God took for themselves women and had giants as their children. And I don't know exactly what to do with it except to go to somebody like Michael Heiser and say, "What's all that about?" I will tell you how it corresponds, though. It doesn't. It does not, if there's a Venn diagram between that story and what happened with Mary and Jesus, there is no point of connection here. God the Father, through the Holy Spirit, created life inside of Mary. It was an absolute instantaneous miracle where someone who's going to be 100% man and 100% God, who had existed forever, but was going to take on form as a man, Jesus, God with skin on, was created in a moment. And so there is no correspondence between what happens there in Genesis 6. You might want to look that up. You probably are pretty interested in it right now because it sounds crazy. But let's just admit it. A lot of the Bible sounds crazy, all right? A lot of it. You guys are looking at me uncomfortably. It does. And that's okay to say because it's supernatural. And so check it out. But yeah, there's no correspondence between those two. And Jesus was not a giant. He was just a normal-sized guy. At least that's what we think from prophecy. It's shockingly easy to put the crown on myself and hard to take it off. Do you have any advice on how to stay away from that mentality? Well, I do have a friend. I will tell you, I struggle with this. And I think in church we ought to say, we ought to admit to each other, look, it's much more natural for me to put myself behind the steering wheel. It's much more natural for me to decide I'm going to do what I want to do. But I have a friend right now who's having this ongoing conversation with God and just telling him about his day. And I think that's called like prayer, and people are doing that these days. And I've started trying that. And I'll tell you this. I already do like an every minute, like God is here, God is real, God is relevant. My phone's not going off because it's back there, but it reminds me, and I just try to keep that in front of myself. But now I'm using that as an opportunity to just tell God about what's going on. And I think it has this amazing side effect as I'm telling the ruler of my life, my dad, my heavenly Father, this stuff has this amazing side effect of me realizing, oh, I'm not in charge. This isn't about me. And I always want to go and in the in-between times, put it back on. But it doesn't fit. I don't do well at running my own life. And I think telling those stories to people around you, being in a life group with people and letting them know this is what I'm going through is always a reminder. I'm not that good at this. I need to acknowledge a new king, not me. Herod reigned until 4 BC, and Jesus' family left for Egypt in fear soon after he was born and before Herod died. Does that alter when we believe Jesus was born, for example, 5 to 6 BC? Yes, it does. Great question. The guy who originally came up with our calendar, he was doing the best he could. I think he was a monk in 400 AD, by the way, when we came up with the current calendar that we have. And he did the math as best he could, but now, looking back, Jesus was probably born in 5 or 6 BC, about a year or two before Herod died, and was buried, by the way, on Herodium. He actually decided to be buried on that one palace. It was his favorite place. But yeah, great question. Jesus was born probably around 5 or 6, which probably puts his date of death at 30 AD, by the way, which makes him 35. So now I'm blowing you away. Yeah, check that out. So probably around 35 is when he died. So thank you for asking those questions. We do this, by the way, because church needs to be a place where people can ask questions. In the first century, people would speak the gospel, and then they would stick around, and people would ask them questions. I love that what we're about to do. We're about to take communion, and I love that we're doing it on the 1st of December, because nothing draws the contrast between my own kingdom and Jesus' kingdom more than the sacrifice that he made for me. I wouldn't have done it with people spitting in my face, accusing me, betraying me. I wouldn't have done it. You wouldn't have either. But Jesus in the upper room looks around at these 12 guys, and he changes the meaning of Passover. He says, literally, it's now going to be about me. This was about Egypt. Now it's going to be about me. Not about me seizing power, but me submitting to the cross. Me letting myself be arrested, letting myself be mocked, crucified even, for you. See, that kingdom's about sacrifice. And every time we take communion, we need to remember that. And that's why here at Reality, if you're a believer, if you've believed that Jesus is who he says he is, that he is God, God with skin on, God, Emmanuel, God with us. If you believe that he can do what he says he can do, that he can give you new life, that he can forgive your sins, that he can give you a new heart, that he can adopt you into his family, that he can seal you for eternity. If you believe that, and you believe he did it for you, then we want to welcome you to take communion with us, because we're celebrating today the fact that he did what we couldn't do for ourselves. So, they're going to pass out the elements, and I think, are we going to sing while they pass out the elements, or no? We're just gonna. They're going to be doing that as I'm talking. I want you, while we're doing that, I want you to take a moment to imagine the afternoon of December 25th. And this year, you're smiling, because the weight of trying to control life is gone from you. You realized back on December 1st, as you were taking communion, that there's only room for one king. Take this chance right now, as you're taking the elements, to take off your crown. You're not worthy of it. Recognize, as we take these elements, recognize the true king, the real king. And then commit, as he sacrificed, that you will too, to build his kingdom. Galatians 2:20 says, I am crucified with Christ. Nevertheless I live, yet not I, but Christ lives in me. And the life which I now live in the flesh, I live by faith in the Son of God, who loved me and gave himself for me. Let's take a moment and just metaphorically take off that crown and lay it at his feet instead. On the night that he was betrayed, Jesus took the bread and he gave thanks. And after that, he broke it. And he said, "This bread is my body, broken for you. Take it, eat, and remember me." And after the supper, he took the cup. And he said, "This cup is the new covenant written in my blood. Take and drink and remember me." A kingdom not built on manipulation, not built on conniving or forcing or arm twisting or someone else's death, but a kingdom built on sacrifice and selflessness and love and grace and his own death. That's what we're remembering. But that's not all we're remembering. Because after that, he said, every time you eat this bread and you drink this cup, you remember the Lord's death until he comes again. Part of what we're remembering right now is because I've seen a lot of people recently say goodbye. Temporary goodbyes, but goodbyes. One day death will be no more. We know that because Jesus walked out of the tomb 3 days later. One day sin will be no more. One day pain will be no more. Goodbyes will be no more. Jesus is going to reform, restore, renew everything. Everything under heaven and earth. He's going to remake this place the way it ought to be. That's true. Not because I say it, but because Jesus proved he had that power. You are going to a place, God is making a place, a party that lasts forever, where the food never runs out, where the music never gets turned down. There will be earplugs for you guys. But the best part is that nobody ever leaves. That's his kingdom. He paid for it with his life. That's what we're remembering today. That the one who died rose again and is coming back. Let's respond to that and let's sing together. All right, as we go from here, may you lay down the crown that doesn't fit and recognize the true King who came to set you free. May the humility of Christ who chose the cross over the throne guide your choices this season. This Christmas, make room for the King who made room for you. Go now in his peace to build his kingdom and to share the freedom and joy that only he can bring. Amen.